Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Thanks for joining us. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a member of the customer success team here at Helpshift. Today, I'll be walking you through custom issue fields, why we built the feature, some common use cases, and our recommendations on how you can start using the feature right away. During the second half of this webinar, we're going to jump into a short demo, and we'll provide time for Q&A at the end of the session. Everyone here has, different verticals, backgrounds, industries. If we can't answer your question for some reason, we will definitely email you at the end to address those. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this webinar, and we're going to email that recording out to you afterward. You'll notice that there is a chat option in the top left-hand corner of your screen, and you're welcome at any time to submit your questions in the chat, and a member of the team will log those for us to address at the end during Q&A. As I mentioned, if we can't answer your question for some reason, we will email you to catch up on those after the fact. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So what are custom issue fields? For those of you that are new to custom issue fields, maybe you're a newer customer or you haven't investigated the feature at all, custom issue fields are a new way to add properties to issues that allow for easier categorization. They are a more robust alternative to tags that allow admins to have greater control over your workflows, business operations, and reporting. I'm going to address a number of questions today, like why did we build it, how custom issue fields are different than tags, and if you move over to the system, what the impact is going to be for you and your team. And I hope that you'll be able to see that in the demo. So first, let's answer why we built it. To put it very simply, the aim of custom issue fields is to give admins more flexibility and control over how issues in Helpshift can be categorized. The feedback that we were getting from customers is that their domains had an overload of tags. They were bloated, there were too many. And over time, that became cumbersome and difficult to keep track of and manage. This wasn't just a pain for the admins, but it was also a pain for the agents as well, because they're the ones that were responsible for remembering all the different tags. In addition to that, classifying and reporting on issues with tags alone could be difficult and time-consuming. Routing based on tags required very specific logic that wasn't always easy to read or understand even, depending on what you were doing. So to better help our customers eliminate these types of issues, we created custom issue fields. So what are the main benefits and differences between tags and custom issue fields? At a high level, you're going to find overall as admins that you have much more control in managing your agent workflows, whether that be via automations, routing, or smart views. Your agents are going to find completing the tasks that they need to do on each issue to be much more straightforward. Agents no longer have to remember a long list of tag names, and onboarding and training for new agents is going to be more intuitive. You're also going to notice that creating custom reports in Power BI to be much simpler with custom issue fields. Information that you'd normally append to an issue as a tag will now have greater depth, and like values or like information can be more easily grouped into a single category, which you couldn't do before with tags. Now, if you don't know what Power BI is, or you're not using it yet and you need more information on how to get started with Power BI analytics, then speak to your account manager or email the customer success team at success@helpshift.com, and we will be happy to help get you set up. Now, you're going to have 6 field categories to choose from. Each category is going to have its own logic. So before, you had this concept of flat tags, and now you have this kind of expanded field type with these special properties. You can have a drop-down, a single or multi-line text field, a number, a checkbox, or a date. If you're transitioning some information over to a number field that used to be used as a tag, for example, you can now run advanced logic on that field. So maybe you wanted to set lifetime value as a custom issue field. You can run automations that route your incoming issues using greater than or less than logic. Is at least, is at most, is between. Instead of needing a paid and an unpaid tag, you can just use the checkbox option and filter by the Boolean logic of paid equals true or false. With tags, logic like this was just not possible. So before we jump into the demo, there are a couple things that I really want you to think about. What customer or end user information are you collecting today? Is it actionable? How does it tie in to your higher level goals? Maybe your focus is on streamlining your reporting. What does a weekly report look like at your company? What data are you working with right now to form that report? If you feel that it might be better to present that end user information in custom issue fields format, what is the right type of field for that data? So like we just talked about, some things are going to make a lot of sense to be checkbox, Boolean logic. Some things are going to make sense to be a number field like LTV. Kind of just have in the back of your head, how you want to map those things, because there are different ways you can do it depending on the data type. If you, if you can make your agents' lives easier, how are you going to do it? What are some of the things that you could do to modify their workflows with custom issue fields that would create less friction for them and less confusion? How can you standardize their jobs to make them more efficient? Time is money. If you have an account manager, this is something worth talking to them about so that they can help you answer those questions if you're not quite sure where to start. So let's get into some real examples so you can really see custom issue fields in action and get a better understanding of the feature in a live environment. We're going to start in what should be a very familiar view on the Issues tab. You can see here that this is a new issue and it's tagged with subscriber, issue type bug. Here we have issue type login, sign up date October, JIRA non-subscriber or non-payer basically. As we talked about earlier, tags got a big demotion with the arrival of custom issue fields. So now when I click on this custom issue fields tab, you can see a variety of customer specific information that's displayed in a number of ways. So pretty much those tags that I showed you a second ago, we've translated them into some form of a custom issue field. So the very first thing here is you can have a drop down. And maybe this is where you place issue type, shipping method, location, region, language, something like that. Next, we have a date field. In this example, we're showing sign up date, but maybe for you, that's an install date or something else. Here, you have a calendar widget that pops out for your agent to make a manual selection if they need to, or they can just type in whatever it is they want, as long as it's a date. Here you have the LTV field, lifetime value, and this is set specifically to be a number. If I type in some junk and hit save, I'm going to get a validation error and have to correct my mistake. So maybe before for you, this was a smattering of different, payment tier tags like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. You don't need to mess with that anymore, bother with that. If you map your LTV to a number field, then you can run all that logic right out of Helpshift. We're just going to hit cancel here. Here you have a subscriber checkbox. So paid, unpaid, whatever. If this is checked, they're a subscriber. If it's blank, they're not. Here we can see they don't pay me anything. They're a non-subscriber. Any Boolean data type that you collect today would be a great fit for this type of custom issue field. Next, you see the JIRA field. This is a single line text field that would be great for things like maybe a last order number or a geolocation. Finally, we have the multi-line text field. And this is where you're going to put special notes or particularly important information that you might not want to get buried in a longer thread. Now in this demonstration, I'm just showing you one example of each field type so that this doesn't get too out of hand, but you can create as many as your heart desires. You might, depending on your business and what you want to do, you might have multiple drop downs. You might have, you're definitely almost positively going to have multiple single line text fields because this is where you're going to be mapping Oh, I'm sorry, this is a single line text field, but you may have multiple single line text fields. You're probably going to have multiple number fields because you're going to map different stuff from the SDK or from the API. And you're going to have a mix of things that are going to be manually made, either inputs or drop downs by an agent. So you're going to have some kind of funky combination that's unique to you. So don't be scared that you only see 6 here. You can go wild. But we recommend going wild with a friend. So make sure that you talk to your account manager or member of the team if you have any doubts or want some advice on best practices there so that you don't get too out of control. I'm excited for you, but let's do it with some intention. Okay. So how do you actually go about creating and populating these fields? Let's get into that. Now I'm going to click over here to the settings page. And you can see that I'm on the custom issue field section under the workflows dropdown. You can see here all the fields that we just covered, their order, and an option to create a new field. Now let's say that we want to pass through the number of purchases that my customer has made in the last 90 days. What was their spend? You could do spend in the last 90 days. You could do number of purchases in the last 90 days. In this case, we know this is going to be a number, so I'm going to select number. Now, there are a few components to creating a new custom issue field. The label is going to be visible to my agent. So this is what they're going to see. This is what's going to show up on the actual issue in that tab. So here I'm going to write number of purchases in last 90 days. Now the key is what my developer is going to use to map that user information to the custom issue field, whether that be via the SDK or maybe the REST API. Now, I want this to be more succinct because I like my developer and don't want to send him this long key. So I'm just going to do purchases last, whoa. So that's a good thing to demonstrate. You need to only put alphanumeric characters here or you're going to get an error. Purchases last 90 days. So that's a little bit shorter than what I had before. You could even do purchases last 90. Now it's important to note here that you cannot change the key once you save it. Now, if you make a mistake, before you actually even start using this field, you can always archive it, delete it, and start over. So don't stress about that. But once you actually start and you give this to your developer and you say, okay, I need you to map this over for me, please, then you're not going to be able to go back and change this later if you want to. So keep that in mind. The label you can change anytime. Maybe you want to make it shorter, longer. Whatever you wrote the first time was unclear, you can do that whenever you'd like. But this part you need to feel really good about because you're not going to be able to update that. So if you have any doubts, maybe ask your developer what would be best. Now, because this is going to be a systematically set custom issue field, there probably isn't much sense in letting my agent edit this field. But if I want to, then I can unlock it for them so that they can manually populate the data here if they need to. For the sake of this demo, we're going to unlock it. You're probably going to find that for the majority of things that are systematically populated that the agent cannot clairvoyantly know, then you're going to keep that locked. Anything through the API or the SDK is most likely going to be locked, but there could be some circumstance or use case where you don't want to do that. Now, the field placeholder is basically helper text. This is where you're going to say, you're just going to expand upon whatever it is to maybe leave a note for your agent. So if this was a JIRA field, you might say, enter the JIRA URL from whatever project. Maybe you have a support specific project, any kind of details you need to give. That's all that is. So here we're going to just leave it at enter a number and hit save. So now you can see this is showing in our list, and maybe depending on whatever the field was I added, it makes sense to drag and drop that, reorder it. I can just hit on edit order like I will with the Smart View, drag, drop, change the order. The actions I can take is to edit, duplicate, or archive. Now, archiving is a prerequisite to deletion. So if you made a mistake and you want to get rid of something, you first archive it, then you go over here to this kind of holding cell for these archived custom issue fields, and you click on it. You can click delete. You can unarchive it, or if you want to see, you know, what it's all about, you can view the details of that field just to make sure you're actually deleting the right thing. Now let's head back over here to the issue section of the dashboard, and we're going to dig a little deeper into how we can use this in an everyday workflow. So you've seen the fields, you've kind of seen how you can create the fields, all the different drop-down types. Let's look at what we can actually do with them now that we have, you know, a number of issues that are populated with all this information. So I'm going to pop out my smart views here. And maybe I want to create a smart view that shows me, I don't know, all the signups that I've had since March. Let's just say we're going to do signups since March. And I'm going to go in, and you'll see now at the bottom, before you have these default issue fields, which you all should be pretty familiar with. But then now at the bottom, you see you've got this custom issue field section showing up. And for this use case, I want to do sign up date. And I'm going to say sign up date is after March 1. And let's see how many issues that gives us. So that gives me 10 issues. I can see this person signed up in July, this person signed up in September, this person signed up October 18th, and so on. Okay, so we got 10 of those. Then we'll go up and we want to see how many of these people are paid. Scroll back down. You can do it two ways. So for the sake of this, I'm going to do the subscriber option. But maybe you want to say not just how many of them are paid, but you want to say, okay, how many of these people pay me at least X, at least 50, at least 100, at least 1,000, depends on you. Or you want to say, show me people who have signed up since March that are between, or in the month of October, or whatever it is, that are in between $100 and $200. So you kind of have that power to do all that now. If you tried to do this in the past with Smart Views, you were going to have, you know, all these different tags for all these tiers, and then the tiers were based on your business logic that you had preset. You didn't have any flexibility to make your own tier on the fly and say, well, I decide today that my tier is going to be, you know, between 1,000 and 2,000. Unless you pre-planned that into your business logic, it wasn't going to happen. So now you can do that if you want. For this, we're just going to say, okay, how many people are a subscriber is true, so paid equals true. And let's see how many of those. So now we're down to 7 issues. Since March, of those people that signed up, 7 of them have paid me, that have submitted an issue. For me, you know, let's say we did October. For me, it makes sense that if a paid user is already writing into Helpshift after only being on the service for maybe a month, then I probably want to make those issues a priority and help them first. So I don't want to risk a bad user experience for a new user and potentially lose that, that subscription revenue. So maybe instead I want to call this new signups. And instead we're going to do sign up date is within the last 30 days. So this can just be rolling forever. You don't need to go in and change it. And then we're going to do subscribers true update. Now I see that I have 1 issue and this person got charged, but their account's locked. So that's kind of something you could do just to keep, you know, keeping your views to kind of be scanning for regularly, depending on whatever that use case is. Now let's do another one. Maybe I want to do what we just talked about and magic up a new tier that didn't exist before because I didn't have the tag for it. Let's say I'm going to make up a new tier called VIP 10. And VIP 10 is anyone that's paid me $1,000 and above. Now I can go in and I can say LTV is greater than 1,000, save. Boom, I got 2 issues. Maybe I want to go in and let's just do, let's say I want to see all the people who have paid me that are facing some kind of technical issue. I can do paid bugs and I can say subscriber is true and, well, first, sorry, just so we can kind of see the filtering. Subscriber is true. Okay, that gives me 9 issues. And then I want to go in and I'm going to say, okay, subscriber is true and issue subject is technical problem and bug, update. Now that brings me down to 3 issues. And when I actually go into that custom issue field, I can see the subscriber checkbox is checked, the LTV is here, and the issue subject is technical problem/bug. It's always going to consistently be in the right order. It's very clear. It's how I want it to be. I don't have to go in the be looking at the issue up here and trying to figure out what are the characteristics of this person. They might have been filtered properly in the Smart View. You may have Smart Views that totally do what you want them to do, and you can maybe recreate some of these use cases. But just from a visual perspective, they're all just kind of jumbled up here, and they're going to be in a different order. So now I can, click on this and see very easily, okay, here's my Smart View, this is my filter, and when I look, that's very quickly confirmed for me, when I'm on this tab here. So you can probably imagine, I hope you can imagine, that because you have this kind of separation of issue types and these separation of data points by field, it's going to make your life tremendously easier when you're trying to create a report in Power BI. And maybe you wanted to replicate one of those use cases that we just went through in a report, and you want to say, okay, I want to see all of my VIPs in the last 3 months that have faced a technical problem, or I want to see all my VIPs in the last 3 months that maybe had a login issue, or whatever it is, a refund problem. It's going to be tremendously easier to do that now because you can just go in, select that drop down, and everything's going to be nicely grouped together in the reporting. You want to do pivot tables and go crazy, you can. In the past, it would be time consuming to try and do that in analytics. So just how filtering within Smart Views is a lot more streamlined, automations reap a similar benefit here. So let's go into automations. And I have a very strict SLA for my VIP customers at my company. I want to make sure that anyone that is a tier 6 or above gets responded to within at least 1 hour. In the old way, I would need to set up my automation like this. I would need to say, if the agent's first response was not sent in 1 hour and the tags has 6, 7, 8, or 9, but it has none of 1, 2, 3, or 4, then please apply these actions. Let Melissa know that this issue is out of SLA. This is just a private note to Melissa. And please make sure that this is taken care of. So when I go in, I have to add, all these tags to be able to complete my automation. And there's probably more, filters and things to it. Maybe I do something based on language, but not these other languages. It can get very complicated very fast. Now, with the new way, I go in and I can say, if the agent's first response was not sent in 1 hour and the LTV is greater than 500, then add a private note to Melissa and say this VIP issue is out of SLA. Like we talked about earlier, if you decide that you want to just make up a new tier, or your threshold, the bar moves for what constitutes priority service for you over time as your business changes, you can make that decision anytime and go in and not have to rely on tags. Maybe for VIPs, you decide that you want them to get a personal response, custom response. You can do that very easily. With the tag method, there's no way, there may not be a way for a new employee or somebody who's not as familiar with your setup, like an account manager like me. If I look at that and I don't carefully know what your business logic is, I'm not going to know what a tier 5 is or a tier 4 is. Here, there is no ambiguity with what this automation is intended to do. There's no question that what that spend or that threshold is, which is really cool. Now, maybe you have a department and they just work on billing issues and refunds and stuff like that. You can have an automation that auto-populates the custom issue field based on a keyword like this one. So if title or first message contains any of billing, purchase, payment, credit card, debit card, bank, then set the custom issue field to payment or refund. Now, when these issues come in, they're going to automatically populate that field for me. Then here, I have a routing automation that says if the issue matches these conditions, issue subject is payment or refund, then assigned it to my refunds queue. Now, if you have questions around automations and custom issue fields, don't forget to submit your question in the chat, and we're going to answer that in Q&A very shortly, or get to you over email. So please keep those coming. If you haven't already submitted a question, do let me know. We're happy to go over this with you a little bit more in detail. Now that you've seen the different types of fields that are available to you, how to create them in the dashboard, a few ways of using custom issue fields and automations and smart views, what do you do next? Hopefully, some use case, I know I talked a lot about money and LTV in this and paid and unpaid and that kind of thing, but I thought, at least for me, that's the one that's most exciting. The issue fields are pretty exciting. There's a lot of exciting things, but something might have stood out more to you. But now that you know the fields that are available, hopefully one of these use cases has stood out to you and you've already got some kind of ideas in mind for what you want to tackle first. Again, I ask you to think about your goals. Some of these things, you might be able to set up right away, but just like we talked about tag bloat, the last thing that I want to see you do is just map a ton of data over to custom issue fields, but then you don't know what you're going to do with it. Make sure that you're making your agents' lives a little easier, not a little bit more difficult, because they need to fill out all this stuff and then you don't actually do anything with the field. So please be mindful of that. If you're looking to improve your reporting, what are those key values that need to be translated into custom issue fields? What tags are you most reliant on today? What are you using all the time? Is that a tier? Is that an issue type? Is that a subject? Do you have, really, really specific things that you're doing for bugs or feature requests? What kind of tags do you have? How can you make those more actionable? If it's something like an install date or a lifetime value, how are you going to map that over to a custom issue field? Are you going to need to speak with your developer to make that change? And pretty much, a lot of cases, you probably are going to have to ask for their help at some point to get this done. There are a lot of things that you can do on your own, but you will need their help at some point for some of these systematically set fields. I would recommend that you should start planning what you can do on your own. Things like issue type, you can easily do that on your own today. As soon as you click end on this call and walk away, you can go do that right now at your desk. Other things like mapping LTV, you're going to need help. So kind of separate out in your head, all right, what can I do now? What can I do later? What are my priorities? And where do I need to start? We have an entire knowledge base section that is dedicated to custom issue fields, including articles that explain how to set this up in Power BI. And I didn't go over it today, but we're going to do another session down the line that shows more in-depth how you can use custom issue fields in Power BI. So stay tuned for that if you think that might be something that you're interested in, and the analytics piece was something that really stood out to you here. In the meantime, I would encourage you to speak to your account manager or write to us at success@helpshift.com if you need advice on best practices on how to use these fields. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions. I think we already had a few submitted, so let's go ahead and tackle some of those. One question we have here is, are custom issue fields persistent to users through multiple tickets? I guess the answer there would be yes and no. It depends on what fields you're mapping. So if you were mapping something that is, verifiable user data like a username or a subscription number, a UID, maybe you map that to a single line text field, then that would be persistent across tickets. But if you're trying to do something like add a private note, use the multi-line text field as a user note because you want that field to follow the user around, then that kind of thing would not be possible. So if it's a manually filled field, the answer is no. If it's a systematically programmed field, the answer is maybe, depending on the value. So obviously values can change, your purchase numbers and things like that are going to update over time. Another one was, which version of the SDK includes custom issue fields? And what's the number, Sam?
6.3.
6.3.0.
It's actually available now.
Yeah, it's available now. So if you go to the dev docs, check out the release notes, you can see all of that. And again, we're going to send this deck out, and on that last slide, I had a link to the dev docs there as well. Thanks, you guys.